Most founders obsess over sales, over systems, over funding, but ignore the real growth engine, and that is people. Today's guest, Dr. Cynthia Bentzen-Mercer, is a US Today best-selling author, executive coach, and the creator of the Human Capital Investment Strategy. And she's used this in high growth companies to scale smart, but not chaotically. Now, with over 30 years of experience in C-suite, Cynthia has helped leaders treat talent like a strategic portfolio. And she showed how to build a team that won't burn out as you level up. Now, this episode is a must if you're going through scale up specifically and want to create what I call a competitive edge. So we're going to be covering a multitude of different topics. We're going to be going through what human capital management really is all about, because I know that Cynthia's written a best-selling book, which we're going to be talking about, of course. I'm going to be talking a little bit about talent management, but more specifically, I want to really relate this to for you guys that are scaling up. And there are quite a few of you guys that are scaling up, and how important it is to get that talent down to a T. Welcome to the Business Strategist, the show for CEOs and founders ready to scale fast, lead smarter, and build a business that doesn't rely on them. I'm Adam Strong, award-winning strategist, former elite athlete, international speaker, and 3 times best-selling author. After 3 decades in business, I know exactly what it takes to grow, scale, and exit with impact. Each week, I dive into real conversations with industry experts, bold entrepreneurs, and clients navigating the uphill struggles of business, giving you the tools and the strategies to create more profit, more freedom, and more impact. Let's get into it. Hey guys, I just wanted to take this opportunity to make you aware of a brand new tool that we've just created called the Exit Readiness Assessment. Now, it is for founders and CEOs that are looking to exit from their business operations. Now, it doesn't matter even if you're not looking to exit right now, I would highly recommend to go and take the assessment straight away. It helps you to identify areas in your business that you need to work on to help you towards that exit strategy. And at the end of it, you get a personalized report on some of the areas that you're doing particularly well in and some of the areas that you need to make some improvements to. Make sure you head over to readytoexit.scoreapp.com. That's readytoexit.scoreapp.com. Enjoy. Anyway, big warm welcome, Cynthia. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me and for that lovely introduction.
Welcome. It's great to have you. And it's really interesting. When we spoke off air, which I think was last week or the week before, the first initiation or the first reaction to what human capital management, I was like, whoa, what? Tell us a little bit more about that, because in context, it sounds very complicated in layman's terms, but could you give us a little bit of context around what that means to the average Joe?
Yeah, absolutely. So I kind of think about it, if you think of sort of a pyramid, right? So at the foundation, you want individuals that have the ability, the physical ability, the cognitive ability to do the work. So whether that's lift 50 pounds or drive, what have you. You also need individuals to fit within the culture of your organization. If you're a very fast-paced culture, high growth, that's a different culture than somebody that's keeping the wheels running on time. Sounds like the person listening is more likely that high growth model. At the very foundation, the non-negotiables are I have to be able to physically do the job and fit the culture. And then we layer on things like skill and knowledge. Those are teachable attributes. I can learn the knowledge. I can learn to recite the care path. And the skill is I can execute that. And then at the tip of that is the natural talent, which you referred to in part of your opening remarks, which are the non-teachable from my vantage point in positive psychology. It's the hardwired DNA, the stuff you do naturally. The composite of all of those things are the human capital that individuals bring to your organization. And so rather than focusing on one element,
Yeah.
When we're thinking about human capital, we're thinking about the entire collection of what I am bringing as an individual to your organization to invest and to put forth the energy and the effort.
So you're looking at it from a big picture perspective. We're not just
Right.
talking about a person or, a person per se, individual, whatever. You're looking at big picture. We're looking at DNA. We're looking at
Mm,
personality. We're looking at the full boundary. Is that, have I said that correct?
exactly. Exactly. Because so often we pick and choose which thing that we're going to focus on. And so what I'm really challenging you as a business leader is to think about the whole collective. And then as we'll get into, if I'm going to place my bet, where will I place my bet in terms of
Mhm.
um, greatest greatest return on that investment?
Yeah, love that. Some good stuff. Tell us a bit more about your background. Sorry, I skipped a question there, didn't I? But tell us a bit more about your background. I mentioned that you've been in this kind of realm for the last 30 plus years, long time. What have you discovered in relation to this capital strategy piece? Like, give us a bit of a backstory.
Sure. So, really spent majority of my career in human resources. So, in both American-based and international organizations, predominantly throughout Asia Pacific and the UK when I was in with a commercial real estate organization. And what I found over and over again is that CEOs across industry. I've been in hospitality, construction, real estate, casino gaming, and healthcare. So, across industries, I have found that CEOs really want to consider people their most important asset. They say a lot of the right things, but when push comes to shove, our attention are on the capital assets, the financial assets, and people are an expense. They are a burden, a labor burden, not something that we see as an asset and an investment strategy. And so, one of the things I would see over and over again as the chief human resources officer, the person responsible at the top of the people strategy, is that organizations would staff up during peak times based on seasonality or because business is really taking off, what have you, and then massively lay off when they need to right size the organization because they're going through um, a period where the economy is suffering or seasonality is striking the business. And in my mind, there needed to be a better approach than this constant flux that is destroying your culture.
It's an interesting one. I guess it's not a straightforward answer. It's
Right.
probably right. It's the multi-million dollar question.
Yeah.
So I think this could be a really interesting episode for you guys that are listening in, by the way, because it is very opinion led. I think Cynthia's really made a really valid point around the whole kind of seeing people as an expense rather than an investment. I think you made a really valid point. Tell us a little bit more about with the founders that you worked for in the past. So, some of the clients that you work with currently
Mhm.
that are in what we call scaling mode. What does the mindset shift actually look like? Tell us a little bit more of the breakdown. What do you take them through?
Yeah, Adam, I think it's a really important point, and I would offer that I think it is more evidence based than opinion based. If we
Mm.
really look at the data, it's an awareness factor. What we find in corporate America, in corporate Britain, and you're right throughout around the world, is that we are still using ideals and filters from the industrial time. We're using things that are very skill and knowledge focused. And so what we have is leaders who've historically given a lot of credit and a lot of belief in how many years experience you have. Most of us wouldn't say it out loud anymore, but how old or young the person is, right? We know better generally than to say those words out loud, but many leaders think that they're too old to have the energy, they're too young to have enough seasoning. So we use a lot of these very old traditional measures of determining if a person is the right candidate for the role. or the right candidate for the promotion. And
Mhm.
what data and evidence will tell us is that those particular filters are non-predictive. In fact, age has an inverse correlation, ironically, right? So to the person listening that says, well, I'm not hiring anybody without 10 years of experience in this particular industry doing these things, we're putting up some guardrails that are not only not predictive in determining future performance, but very likely shrinking the pool of people we're even considering down so far that we are eliminating all kinds of talent that could frankly be force multipliers because they're a better fit.
Yeah, that's a good point. Especially with, I mean, there's been a lot of, especially over the last 5 years, where you've probably heard of terminology such as, the silent resignation, for example. That's just being one of them. Another one would be like, for example, the Gen Z culture of,
Mm-hmm.
hey, they didn't want to, they saw their parents work their asses off, um, and now they're paying the price and having to invest in huge amounts of wealth in order to regain their health. And
Mm-hmm.
so, what you're saying, you made a really interesting point, which is around the mindset shift from industrial revolution to what we are now in the digital revolution.
Mm-hmm.
My question would be is, and what does that look like in context? If people are, if leaders and CEOs are using qualifications and knowledge and experience as a baseline to improve their talent, and you're saying no, okay, so then what is it? Hey guys, I just wanted to grab your attention because we've just created a brand new resource for you guys called the Exit Playbook, how to shift from operator to visionary leader. Now, this was based on a podcast that I did a few months ago and is the leadership blueprint for being able to help yourself successfully exit your business. Now, we go into many different things. We're going into some of the common symptoms of why founders get trapped in operations and what to look for and the impact that it actually has on you. We also go into some deep dive exercises that addresses some of the fears, some of the reflections, also how to basically let go of some of the control that you have, but more importantly, how to shift your identity within your business and how to align your strategy to your exit and how to challenge your belief systems, more importantly. Listen, it is a free playbook. The link is in the show description notes. Enjoy. I think you're going to find it a really useful resource. Take care.
Predictive validated assessments. And so
Okay.
you can go about this one of two ways. You can build or buy. So you either get the right knowledge within your organization to build a structured interview. And when I say structured interview, simple terms, right? It's the same questions for everyone that's applying for a particular job. They're behavioral based, and you have a very clear conceptual match of what the answer looks like based on top performers. So you study your best or the best of the best in your industry. You understand what the best of your best in the industry or within your organization are from a natural talent, not skill and knowledge perspective. And you build an interview that consistently is given to every candidate. And you're looking at the layer that I can't teach, but I can develop, right? Or there are many organizations out in that are international that provide already predictive validated psychometric instruments that you can bring into your organization. There's predictive index, there's talent plus, there are a number of others that we can put in the show notes by example. But what those do is when you look at the Schmidt and Hunter study that's been validated over and over again, and you look at the predictive validity, we're talking about things like years of experience or time in the job, what have you, or education as being point 0.2, point 0.02, point 0.03 in terms of predictive validity. When you're using a true predictive model or assessment, you're looking at 0.05, 0.06. I've seen them as high as 0.8. Now I'm saying I'm adding science to my gut. because now I can say they feel like they fit the culture. They have the requisite skill and knowledge. I'm not suggesting that you hire somebody to do operations in a medical field that don't have a medical degree, right? Or I'm not suggesting that you hire an executive assistant that doesn't know how to type. But you might hire an executive assistant that isn't a master of Excel and be willing to have them go through a class to learn that because they have all of the other gifts like anticipate needs, natural smiler, relational builder, etc.
Interesting. So the first thought that came to my mind then is, what's the difference between an assessment over, say, psychometric testing? Because there's lots of psychometric tests that's out there. Do they work in synergy with each other, or are they polar opposites in terms of the outcome of what they determine to deliver?
So it's a little bit of semantics, right?
Mhm.
And that may also be differentiated in terms of how we think about things in the US versus the language that you're using in Great Britain versus someplace else. But let me answer it based on more of a global response. An assessment and a psychometric instrument can in fact be the same thing. The thing that you're looking for is, what is the predictive validity of the assessment or the instrument, right? Is it predicting performance? So it's different than Myers Briggs, the DISC profile. There's a lot of 4-quadrant models out there, right? Those are interesting, but DISC only cuts the data 16 ways. And the reality is there's way more varieties of talent than 16 looks, right? Or in Myers Briggs, I could be an ENFJ and you could be an ENFJ, but we could be really wired for very different types of jobs. So, what a good psychometric talent instrument is looking at is, for this kind of job, for a sales job, for a leadership position, for a customer service representative, the talent themes that are most aligned with that job, and how similar is the candidate to the top performing teacher, police officer, nurse, right? So it's getting the right instrument in the first place and ensuring it has high predictive validity.
Now we're certainly getting into the science
We're
and the
getting into the
data and stuff like
data. Yeah, yeah,
that. Now, normally I'm not a numbers person, but actually you kind of you got my creative juices flowing. So, but that's really interesting. I mean, because you've studied this and you would have
yes.
seen the patterns and, and what's good, what's not so good, or what can be improved upon and things like that, right?
Yeah. And here's the thing too, Adam, I want to add. I don't own a behavioral science company. I don't have stock in a talent instrument, right? So this is completely objective and based on data of looking at how people assess candidates and what works. I think the really important thing for the person listening is where the right, because there's an
Mm.
investment. There's an investment to put this kind of rigor. The why bother is the force multiplier.
Mm.
And that is when I get the person who is most naturally wired to do that type of job, and I couple that with the requisite skills and knowledge, they will outperform an average person,
Mm.
right? And it's really not the person that's average, it's really average for that job. They will outperform 2 to 3x. And so, what that does now is that when you staff, and I'll just be hypothetical, you staff with 50 people for your growing business because you're
Mhm.
scaling, you're able to staff with these highly talented individuals that you have high predictive validity that they're in the right role and they're going to do the things naturally, consistently, spontaneously, and they're going to perform 2.5 to 3 times X somebody else. Now, as you're growing, you can start small and you can scale up. And if unfortunately seasonality or other things happen where you need to pull back, you don't have to lay a bunch of people off because you haven't bloated in the first place.
Yeah.
So that's really, I mean, in addition to better customer service, better bottom line results, people that love what they do,
Hmm.
delight the people they're working for.
Yeah. So what you're saying is basically it's more lasered focus specifically about how do I get the most out of people,
Right.
really in a nutshell, right? If I could
Right.
summarize it, right?
If you
Okay.
put you your natural talent, right? You're a strategist. You're a big thinker. You're able to see things several steps down the road before most other people. It's spontaneous. It's consistent. You don't sometimes do that. You always, you can't help yourself. You find joy in that, right? At the end of the day, when you've got really to turn the light bulb on for somebody, that feels amazing.
Mm,
So when it's consistent and it's spontaneous and it feels good and you do it with excellence, you're living in a place of natural talent. Imagine that every single person that worked for you
mm,
was doing a job that 80% of what they did every day was spontaneous and consistent. They did with excellence and filled them with joy. They're going to work harder, produce more. I mean, the benefits are exponential. But instead of focusing there, even though that people and labor are the most expensive part of our balance sheet, right? In most industries, it's the number one cost. In some industries, it's the second most expensive.
mhm,
And yet, we don't treat it with the same care and rigor that we would our financial portfolio.
mm.
If you had an
Interesting.
underperforming fund in your financial portfolio, you would address it immediately.
Of course.
If you have an underperforming employee, we may or may not address it immediately.
Mm,
If you have an average performing fund, you'd put it on a watch list and you'd
yep.
have some criteria about what that's going to mean, whether it's going to stay or not. When you have an average performing employee, sometimes we just kind of look the other way. So
Mm,
there's all of these. We'll take a bet on a new fund if we've done our research. It has good reason to believe it's going to outperform, even though it's new, hasn't had a lot of time on the market yet. But we're thinking we've got intel that says it's going to be amazing. We're going to take a risk on that. We seldom take that same risk when it comes to people, nor do we have the data to support taking the risk.
I think you make a very interesting argument, should we say, in the way that a lot of founders and CEOs run their businesses. And I think you're right. I think whether it be as you had rightly pointed out, which is regards to running a fund, but it could also mean things like focusing too much on increasing valuation in a company or developing assets within a business. If it doesn't work, we'll probably get rid of it straight away and replace it with something better. But people is a little bit more complicated, right? It's
That's
a,
right.
it's not such a simple thing. You're dealing with human beings here.
That's right.
It's easy to deal with a number or something which generally isn't tangible. Whereas with people, there's a fine line. You always, because there's a lot of psychology that goes into this, as we talked about offline. I suppose I want to pick up a point that you made really, really quickly. How does the frameworks and the strategies that you've developed within the book, how does that help a lot of business owners identify if people are in the right role in what they
Hmm.
do? Because again, that really does affect scale ups. And I cannot tell you how many conversations I've had with people where a business isn't running smoothly because they're unaware that people are not using their natural ability, or they're in a role that is completely polar opposite to their personality, and they're just not getting the most out of it.
Right. Beautifully said. I mean, that beautifully said. So the way that I walk the CEOs through the model is I use a 6-step framework that follows how you would think about an investment strategy,
Okay.
from being very clear on your goals is step one. But step two is developing a pro forma. Step one is developing the pro forma. Step two is really doing an audit, because think about you would not allow your business to run an entire year without monthly looking at your balance sheet
Of course.
and assessing everything, right? Probably more than monthly. For a
Yeah,
lot of us, we're looking at it on
yeah.
on the regular. So what I encourage and what I help CEOs do is look at this in terms of a framework. If you think about it this way, think about that the y axis is performance. And you're
Hmm.
thinking about performance from all of the traditional measures that fit your business,
Okay.
whatever the output is, adherence to budget, revenue, what have you, whatever the performance is. And then the x axis is natural talent. And this is where having a really good instrument that is giving us, we're not guessing at talent, we're really understanding it. So if you think about that framework and the 4 quadrants that go in there,
Yep.
you are evaluating with data, qualitative and quantitative data, your entire human capital portfolio. So if you've got 100 people, you're looking at 100 people and you're saying who has the natural talent that is executing their natural talent, as you just said, and is performing. That's your upper right. We need to invest heavily in those people. Those are our rock stars. Who are those people in that lower right that their performance isn't quite up to speed yet, but they have this big talent? These are perhaps the people we've rolled the dice on and we said, we're going to grow these people up. So, really going to invest and develop those individuals. They've got the raw talent, need more seasoning. Where it gets tricky is the upper left. These are people that are performing, maybe not knocking it out of the park, but performing, but don't really have that big talent for that job. Because remember, everybody has talent. Every single person has talent. The question is talent for what? So, to your earlier point, when you said maybe they're in the wrong role, right? Those are the people oftentimes we sort of don't spend a lot of attention to because they're doing just enough to stay off the radar, but they're not really taking our business to the next level. They don't really have the talent for the role that's big enough to take us to the next level. That is where so much risk and so much opportunity is happening. And then hopefully, that bottom left are the individuals that are underperforming and they don't have the talent for the role. And what I consider there is it's a recast opportunity. You're either recasting them into a role that is a better fit, or you're recasting them to the competition. Right? You're inviting them to go work for somebody other than you.
You're putting them on the market.
You're putting them on the market. Yeah, I like to say a compassionate bus stop. But it's really that upper left, those people that are sort of getting by, they're sort of treading water. And we're busy and we're focused on so many other things that can go on too long and really limit our ability not only to scale, because those individuals can't take on more. That's where you end up having to hire a whole bunch extra people rather than having the force multiplier.
It's really interesting. I recall, must have been a couple of years ago, I recall speaking with a CEO founder on this particular subject that we're speaking about.
The one thing that I don't want to leave without mentioning is the biggest difference, and this is obvious but important, in giving the same rigor and attention to our human capital that we do to our financial capital and other things, is that people can walk, right? People have agency. I choose to bring my human capital to your organization, and I can choose to take my human capital elsewhere. So when you have those individuals that are those rock stars, that are those incredible, high performing, great big talent for role, and they are not invested in, they are not given the attention and the development and the opportunity, especially in this market globally, opportunities are available and they're really available to your most talented.
I agree. I absolutely agree. A few years ago, I was speaking to this CEO founder. The guys were, a few of them weren't working to optimal performance. He was not happy, and he basically wanted to sack them off. But in another way, he couldn't. And the reason why he couldn't was because he was afraid. I'm going to tell you why he was afraid. He was afraid because those people that weren't performing the ones that have dragged their heels were basically his originals,
Mm.
as in friends, family, that basically went through high growth. And so they had to hire Tom, Dick, and Harry to try to fill the void. And now he's got the team back up and running, but he's now got stragglers. How do you deal with the stragglers? Any thoughts?
Yeah. That is a tough situation. And I see that happen in family-owned businesses
Mm,
where you have generational businesses where, how do you fire your brother-in-law, or
mm,
or how do you have the tough conversation with your nephew?
yeah,
But also in organizations, to your point, with entrepreneurs that are building, some buddies that get together or some friends that get together and they sort of build this thing up. The reality is it's not easy, but it has to be addressed, because
yeah.
what happens is companies can outgrow individuals at times. It is
Mhm.
up to the individuals to remain relevant. It is up to the individuals to remain up to date, current, high performing. And there are times where the company just outgrows that individual. Here's what I do know: when you are not performing at the highest level, and when an organization decides to start bringing in top tier talent, and
Mhm.
when I say that, they're doing the rigor to get the best of the best, the person that is mediocre for the job feels it. I feel it when Bob comes in and he's running circles around me, or when Susie comes in and she's running circles around me. It doesn't feel like a gift in the moment, but no one wants to work where they are just getting by, right? It
Yep.
doesn't feel good. So having that honest conversation about, you
Mm,
got me here, and I'm so grateful, having an appropriate bridging perhaps to their next opportunity. But the
mm.
absolute worst thing a leader can do is to hang on out
Yeah.
of loyalty,
Yep.
right?
Exactly.
Because
Loyalty,
it slows the entire business down.
Yep. Absolutely. 100%. And it's not normally the person that's in the position. It is normally the person that's steering the ship that has the problem.
That's right.
So that's for full disclosure. Want to bring up your point about the four quadrants. You mentioned, now I like to classify people as A players, B players, and C players,
Mm-hmm.
and D players, because that's kind of good for me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we use D players, which are, should we say, they're the guys that should really move on.
Right.
But then I want to kind of go back to, so C players and D players. Now, C players, you mentioned that they're just getting by. They're kind of on the cusp where they're just trying to keep their head above water, to not get noticed. Now, I want to bring a point up here. Really valid point. I've run a business where it's really hard to understand if it's a skills issue, or
Mm-hmm.
B, an attitude issue.
Mm-hmm.
How do you try to figure out which is which without trying to force them to exit from the business and, be a bit of a douchebag?
Right.
How would you go about it?
Yeah. So skill will is kind of what you're talking about. Do they have the skill or do they have the will? Which is it that's holding them
Exactly
back?
that. Exactly.
And what I would add is talent.
Yeah.
So that is the third part of the stool that often gets left out.
Hmm.
It's not a skill or will, it's a natural wiring. And let me give you an example, and then I promise I'll directly answer
Go
your
for it.
question. Another example of folks that would be in the C category, or my upper left on my
Yep.
quadrant, and we all know these people. They're the individual that works in your organization that knows where all the bodies are buried. They have all the institutional knowledge. They run all the reports on time, right? They're amazing. Nobody likes working with them, right? They they aren't a natural smiler. They're rough around the edges. They're bitter Betty, but you can't imagine not having bitter Betty, because bitter Betty gets the reports out every week, or runs the payroll, or does whatever
Hmm.
the thing is that you are relying upon. And you, as an entrepreneur, as an owner, don't want to have to deal with that. So you'd rather just put up with bitter Betty than have to, and get your reports than see her go. So that's
Yep.
another part of the C player. It's this. I would offer this to determine, is this a role player, the C person? Is this a role player that they're only playing right field? That's all they're ever going to be. They're in right field and we're just okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
And so we tolerate that they're a C and nobody's harmed in the process. Then that's when I say, on those rare occasions, by the way, I say, let it ride. When it's blocking somebody else's upward trajectory, when that person who's kind of keeping their head above water, just doing the thing, and somebody else is not having an opportunity for promotion or moving up in the organization, it's a very different story. Or
Yeah.
when they're creating drama. Skill is easy to measure.
Mm-hmm.
It's, do you need more training? Do you know how to do XYZ, right? Skill is easy to measure. Knowledge is easy to measure.
Mm-hmm.
Will can be a conversation around how motivated are they, right?
Mm-hmm.
That comes with direct conversations. Adam, you've been slipping with this. Is there more resources you need? Do you feel like you have all the tools to get this done? Tell me what would be helpful so that you could meet your deadlines, right? So we're having
Right.
that conversation.
Yep.
Most often, we can measure skill and knowledge. We can pretty well figure out if somebody's just like retired on the job, right? We have people
Mm-hmm.
that just kind of retire and stay in place. More often than not, it's the natural talent piece. It's they're not natural, they don't have a natural attention to detail. So they make a lot of mistakes. They're not naturally creative. So they don't come up with the big ideas. They're
Mm-hmm.
not naturally strategic. So they don't see beyond what's right in front of them. It's those things that I like to say, I can't put in what God left out, right? Or pick your divine. That is when it's an uphill battle. Once we determine through an actual predictive instrument or a direct conversation that I'm trying to teach the pig to sing and
Yeah.
it annoys the pig and it frustrates me, that's when you know it's just a bad fit.
Uh, that was a really good answer, actually. And another thing that kind of springs to my mind was startups. This is a really good one. Early stage startup businesses. Now, most of them are really running on adrenaline and, well, loyalty, really, in a nutshell, right? They're hanging on for dear life. And think, especially when you're going kind of through these massive stages of growth and things like that, how should founders approach more of a rebalancing to their human capital portfolio, if you want, when they're going from startup to scale up?
Mhm. So I think two things. First of all, in the startup phase, which is my favorite because it's a greenfield environment, I can start with putting all the right rigor and tools in place. I can make
Mm-hmm.
certain that the person that I want helping me develop strategy has natural hardwired strategic acumen. Even if they don't know the ins and outs of the industry yet, I can teach that part, but they're a big thinker. I can put people in place that I need to make sure are dotting I's and crossing T's and making sure that all of our financials are ticked and tied. I can make sure that that person has that on the front end. So you're building early on this superpower of
Mm-hmm.
people that, again, are quite scalable. As they're racing to scale, the most important thing is the more you put the right people in on the front end, the more that they can do with fewer extra resources. Now, I've been in businesses, healthcare, the restaurant industry that was scaling so fast, or there was such a depletion, like of nurses, that people are, hey, do they fog a mirror? Yeah, they fog a mirror. Great. Put them in. The downside comes very fast because that same nurse or provider or whatever it might be in an industry of the person listening is, if they don't love what they do and they're not wired to do it, the person on the other end of that feels every bit of it.
It's like
Yeah.
crash and burn.
Right. Right. I mean, my kids to this day, you got to be careful who you talk to about this talent stuff. My kids will be in a customer service interaction and the person will be a bit nasty and they'll say, not out loud, of course, but they'll say to me, I guess poor career choice. You know, they clearly don't love what they do.
I love that. It's so funny. When I have lots of conversations with lots of founders, they're very much obsessed with, the new shiny penny, which could be AI, right? Sales. How do I get more funding, or how do I raise my next pre-seed or seed or whatever it is? But miss culture until it bites them. Now, what's the real cost of underinvesting in talent too late? And how do you what is maybe some of the advice that you offer founders in terms of being able to spot it before it's too late, effectively?
The biggest thing that I see is, well, let me back up. I
Yep.
believe that culture is created, nurtured, etc., by who you select, who you
Mhm.
develop, and who you promote, right? So if I'm, as a founder, growing fast, and perhaps because of the pace with which I'm growing my business, don't have quite the attention to the detail of who I'm selecting because I'm focused on all of these other big shiny things. Every time I select somebody in or promote someone who is behaving in ways that are countercultural, what I'm saying to the organization is that's the behavior that gets rewarded here. Every time I bring a leader in that behaves, their behavior, what they say, how they act, is creating culture, even when I'm not around, right? So, understanding how your employees are feeling, watching your attrition numbers, being sensitive to those kinds of things are very important. There's some predictive tools out there through AI and some other things that can start to look at predicting behavior in terms of if these things are starting to happen, it's a sign that things are moving in the wrong direction from a people metrics perspective. And I'm working with a generational company right now. They're in the fourth generation, transitioning to the fifth generation the next decade. They're trying to do a major culture shift. And the advice I'm giving to the CEO and the other three core leaders is it's all about what you express, model, and reinforce.
Mm.
It's not just about what you say. We have a culture where everybody is honored and everybody's, there's dignity and respect and all the things. Most companies have nice words to say and nice mission statements. It's what you model. So when the person listening is out with the employees or pitching business or whatnot, how are they showing up? Because
Mhm.
everyone's watching. You're always under a microscope. But here's the big part of it, which is part of your question. It's what do I
Mhm.
reinforce? And what I
Mm.
reinforce is where 50% of the cultural shift happens. It's when I catch people doing something right and say, Adam, I loved the way you handled that. You handled that with that difficult conversation with such respect. Or it's having a private conversation and saying, Adam, in this company, we really value treating people with dignity and respect. And I have some concerns about how that went, right? And course correcting.
Yeah.
Being a leader takes a lot of courage. And
Yeah.
oftentimes it's relegated to HR. And so for many people listening, probably think this woman does not sound like she came from personnel and people in HR because I come from a business mindset. I love people. I believe people have agency. I believe people have human capital and they can take it where they want to take it. But I also believe that to be great business leaders, we have to make really important, difficult decisions. We have to have the courage to hold out for talent and not hire the first person that walks in. And we have to have the courage to model what we say is important.
Very, very valid points there. In your conversations and your experience, what's the one people decision that most founders regret not making sooner, and how can our listeners avoid it?
I think the biggest regret from a people perspective
Yeah.
is not moving someone on that was behaving counterculturally
Mm.
because they were producing results, right? So the person that is the top salesperson or the person that you've counted on because they land the big deals, but they leave all the bodies in their wake. And it's well downstream that they say, there was a lot of damage done and it wasn't worth the results because those were short lived, but the cultural implications were long term.
Yeah, that makes complete sense to me. It's getting deeper and deeper, ladies and gents. By the way, I hope I hope that you are first of all, enjoying the conversations
Right.
because, I don't think we've ever had anyone on this show actually that has such an advanced knowledge of not just the business psychology side of stuff, but how that kind of crosses over into understanding people and our talent as well, and the cost of that. So this has been a fascinating conversation. Tell us a little bit more about about the book.
So the book is coming February of 2026.
Okay.
It is available for pre-order in August on Amazon. So it'll be dropping on Amazon here in the
Yeah,
next few weeks. And it's
fantastic.
human capital investment strategy, cultivating potential and yielding competitive advantage. So I think that it takes a very heady academic, perhaps, evidence-based topic, but really brings it into the language of business for CEOs, founders, entrepreneurs who want to get ahead of this. I will tell you that the data and evidence and the workforce that's changing, which is covered in chapter 1, is very clear to me that your future advantage depends on whether your human capital strategy moves at as fast as your business strategy. Because by 2030, companies that haven't figured this out are really going to be left behind. There's that much happening in terms of the workforce, the changing dynamics of the workforce, AI, technology, et cetera. We're going to have to get really good at scaling our human capital strategy at pace with our business strategy.
Mm. I think this is a great argument for you guys that are listening in, by the way. And and 2030 is really not that far away, depending on when you're listening to this, of course. I really do believe that people are the key at the end of the day. Without your people, I mean, most people don't have a business at the end of the day. So why would you overlook that? It just
Mhm.
doesn't make any sense to me. So, but that's beautiful. First of all, just want to say thanks so much for being on the show today. This has been it's been a pleasure, and taking what I call, it sounded like a very, what I was going to say, a very simplistic topic, but actually we've turned it into something which I feel has been very interesting for not just the left brain logistical person, right? But also for the right brain creative. So I hope you guys that have been listening in feels the same way too. And by the way, what I was going to say to you is make sure that you check out Cynthia's details in the show description notes, and we'll also put a link there to where you can reach out and connect with her. And one other thing as well, I've noticed for you guys that are listening in as well, is that the majority of you haven't either followed or subscribed to the podcast. Please, if I ask, if there's anything that you could do for me, is to go over and follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast channel. Leave a 1 or a 5-star review, whichever it is, but I will be extremely grateful. Anyway, from me and Cynthia, we'll see you again on the Business Strategist. Take care and speak to you soon. Cheers.